in the book, Rebecca, it's just a very good, it just ties into what you're saying. I give an example of two people. So you can imagine person A is, say, similar to the lady you were speaking about earlier, doing everything, right? Doing all the work, doing the breathwork, doing the exercise, doing the journaling, doing it, eating all the right food, drinking the water, doing all the right things. But in a relationship that's unloving, that's quite toxic, she's in a job that's stressful and she hates, and she's running around all the time just in this kind of bubble of unhealthy relationships and energy. Then you have person B, say it's her sister, and maybe she's not that strict on everything. Maybe she likes the odd glass of wine, but she's out there, she's having fun, she's jumping into the sea, she's meeting up with her friends, she's having the crack, she's doing this. Who do you think is going to be the healthier one?
Oh, I love that. It's so interesting to look at that concept, because people say, like, why me? Why am I the one that's getting sick?
Hello, so if, like many of us, you're exhausted running on empty and you can't figure out why nothing really seems to change, even when you try new tips, hacks, diets, this episode is really going to make sense to you. I'm joined with Miriam Hussey, former pharmacist and now integrative health practitioner. She makes the case that most women are not stuck because they're not doing enough, but because modern life has set us up to experience burnout way too easily, which I really resonate with. It's a really honest conversation, and I'm really looking forward for us to explore this, because it's a topic that I don't think we give enough value to. So yeah, let's get straight into it.
Hello, welcome Miriam. Absolutely delighted to have you as usual. This podcast is one of them ones that you're going to want to play back multiple times, because not only is Miriam a wealth of knowledge in the area of health and integrative health, but also she has lived experience, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. She's 2 young kids, she gets it. So it's going to be one of them episodes you'll want to go back to, because there's a lot of really valuable stuff in it. So I want to start off, Miriam, by saying so much people listening to this, they already are aware of like their nervous system health and their overall physical and mental health and the connection. But from your perspective, what are some of the subtle and overlooked signs of dysregulation that women often miss? And I think that's something that's really been thought about more now, because people are saying, hold on, I'm doing a lot of things really well for my health in terms of nutrition, exercise, regulation, but I still don't feel good.
Yeah. So thank you. Firstly, delighted to be here, Rebecca, and always looking forward to our chats. So that's a great question. And it's one I've had to, ask myself in my own journey in life. And we can kind of get prescribed, I'm coming from my background as a pharmacist. That's what we used to do, prescribe medication to people. But as you move into the kind of more well-being space, we're also prescribing things, but in a different way. And all of the things that we prescribe and all of the things you'll see in the book obviously are really important. So obviously you're looking at your nutrition, you're looking at your movement, your sleep, your rest, all of those things, right? But they're also ways to help sometimes the symptom, right? But similar to medicine, if we're just treating the symptom and not actually lifting the lid to look a little bit deeper into the essence of what actually is going on internally in my mind and my body, but deeper into the essence of who I am, which is my soul, we're not getting to the root of what might be causing the dysregulation in the first place. So all of these things, like your breath work and all things, are brilliant to bring us back into regulation, to coherence, come back into balance. But is anyone asking the question, well, what's tipping me off the scales in the first place? What is actually causing all this dysregulation? And that really, I believe, is the missing pillar a lot in our modern world of wellness. We tend to focus so much on the physical. We are thankfully focusing more on the mind. But actually, are we getting to the nooks and cranny of what is the essence of who we are, which is the soul? And if you're living a life, that's like aligned to what lights you up, to your soul's purpose, to your passions, to your truths, to what really feels honest for you. And are you living a life that then is in alignment to that? Because if you're not, what's happening, we end up living a life we think we should be living, and we start trying to fit into everybody else's script rather than listening to our own soul script. And then we get this internal tug of war. Then we might be doing all the right things in paper. We might be in the right relationship on paper. We might be in the perfect job in paper. You might have just got the promotion. You might be in the beautiful house with the shiny gates and the big car outside. But deep down within you, something doesn't feel right. And often it's because we've lost our soul along the way. And we end up doing things and becoming somebody that's distracted and disjointed and disconnected from what really lights you up, from what really brings you joy, and from really what brings you ease and peace. And the more ease that we have internally is then the less dis-ease that we will manifest externally.
Yeah, it's really, I think that's something a lot of people would shy away from, myself included in the past, because when you look at all the tangible things to do in terms of the food to eat, the exercise to do, the regulation tools that are pretty concrete, like your breath work and your vagus exercises, they're all quite straightforward, and you can put them on paper and you can tick them off, which is really nice. You know, it's very nice to have that list in front of you. But that's work is what a lot of people, and a lot of my clients would, initially when we talk about like what lights you up, what brings you joy, there's no answer, because we've lost that what brings you joy. Like we don't remember that, almost, the things in the past, because we're living a life that is a path that we don't really know how we got on this road. And I think there's so much people living out there that are it's actually amazing how great some people are at doing all the steps really well, but they still feel a lot of fatigue and their sleep isn't good. And I talked to someone the other day about this, and she said, like, she's total type A person. And she's like, I'm doing everything so by the book. And I really am putting in a lot of effort, but I still amn't losing fat. I still amn't sleeping well. And I still feel really tired. And I don't feel a lot of joy. And it's going back then to the next layer. Like your next layer is, okay, you've ticked off all them things. So what is the root cause of this? Potentially it's you're still dysregulated, because you can still do all them tools and have deep dysregulation, because like you say, you're not living in purpose.
No.
Your soul, and even that question to pose to you, what does it mean when you talk about soul? What does that mean? Because I think that's a word that a lot of people, it's very unclear what your soul is.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I always like to simplify things and bring things back to basics. And when it comes to our health and well-being, we don't want to be overwhelming people with more things to do, you know? So the soul is who you are, Rebecca. It's literally, it's your energy. It's your inner spark of light. It's what you have been placed. It carries all the wisdom. It carries your inner truths. And it's what makes you different to everybody else. So you can have a set of identical twins, like my sister has two boys, identical twins. I still find it hard to tell the difference, and they're 10 years of age, you know, exact same, look the exact same, but are completely different. So that's your soul. It's your characteristics. It's your passions. It's your dreams. It's your desires. It's what lights you up. And it's really the essence of who we are as individuals. And if it's the joy in our lives, it's the passion. And we all know, I mean, we can't technically see energy, but we can all feel it. So, you know, love, joy, adventure, freedom, these are all emotions and feelings, but you can't pick them off a shelf and put them on your plate. But we know they exist, and without them, we feel lifeless. So what brings life into your life? It's what brings that soul alive. It's community, it's connection, it's nature, it's love, it's intimacy, it's freedom, it's a sense of liberation. It's living a life that you know feels right and true to you. And when you're not living a life that feels right and true to you, it will show up, and the body is the last place that gets the kind of signal. So for me, in the book, I talk about it's like 3 circles, or 3, like if you think of those Russian dolls, one goes inside the other, inside the other. So the outer circle is the body, and that's the physical body, and that's the vessel with which your soul resides. But that houses everything. That's your bones and your muscles and your organs and your blood and your cells. And it's really important, of course, that we look after all of that. But if you go into the next circle, that's the mind. And that houses everything from your emotions and your feelings and your thoughts. And then if you go in and get a bit deeper again to the inner circle, that's the soul. And if you look at yoga, so I teach yoga, it's the kosha, so the 5 layers, the 5 sheets. And the person comes into the class, they start on the yoga mat, because that's where it's easy for people to meet the body, because it's what we can see, it's tangible. So you get them on the mat, you get them stretching. right? Then you get the breath involved. And the breath, I believe, is the gateway that opens the heart to drop into the soul. That's where we feel everything. That's where we get the knowingness. That's where we get the inner wisdom. That's where we get those gut intuitive messages. But we get blocked and locked along the way through self-limiting beliefs, through overprocessed foods, through distraction and stress and strain and struggle. So what happens is, even on the yoga mat, you start on the external, you work on the body, you stretch, you move, you twist, you flow. Then you bring in the breath, then that drops you into the energetics of the body, drops you into your feelings, your emotions. Again, these are energy. We can't see them, but we know they rule the roost. We know they're in our bodies. And then from that, as you work through the class, then at the end, when you drop down into your shavasana, which is that's the inner place, that's the soul space. That's where you feel that just relief, release. That's where you feel connected. That's where you feel bliss and joy and that peaceful state. We all have that within us. That is the soul. And then spirituality is what connects you to the soul. So often people are like, what spirituality? It's religion, it's God, it's Christ, it's the church. Spirituality can be those things, but it's any modality then or practice that allows you to connect and drop into the soul. And that's the difference. So the soul is who you are. It's that essence, it's the energy, but the spirituality are the tools and the gateways that open the portal for you to drop in there and to truly connect.
That's interesting when we talk about that as a portal, and that portal can be locked when you're living in a body that's very disconnected. And I listened to an interesting podcast from Bessel van der Kolk, the man that wrote The Body Keeps the Score. And he spoke about all the research he's done on things like yoga or Tai Chi or psychedelics, and then been so effective because, again, you're in your body, you're in touch with your body. And a lot of the time there's a massive disconnect, especially in Western society, where we're out of touch with our body. Like, we're not even getting the cues of hunger. We need to go to the toilet. We need to sit down and take a rest. Like, we're so disconnected from the cues because we're in a state of dysregulation that's always rushing. And I find it really interesting if you look at countries around the world and you can stereotype some of them and say, okay, lots of people in parts of the world do Tai Chi, right? And that's a really regulating thing to do. There's breath work, there's movement, you're connected with your body. It's very, in a lot of ways, you're in touch with your soul, spirituality. A lot of people in the countries that do Tai Chi may not do much talk therapy at all, or want to talk about any of the trauma they've had or any of the difficulties they had in the past. But they're in touch with the body. So there's a lot of help from things like Tai Chi, yoga, other ways to drop in to your body. And I think that's a really interesting new kind of thing we talk about in terms of your body being able to regulate. And we often talk about somatic work and movement and opening up your hips and doing more kinds of mobility to help with regulation, because our body, when it's in fight or flight, is quite stiff and tense. So it's really interesting when we look at the likes of yoga, Tai Chi, and other ways that allow us to be in touch with our body, how regulating that is. And then in turn, how much you can then start to think about your soul and spirituality. Because if you're a person that isn't in touch with their body and you feel quite cut off, then it's very hard to be in touch with the soul piece and your purpose and really listening to what your mind and body wants.
And in the book, Rebecca, it's just a very good, it just ties into what you're saying. I give an example of two people. So if you can imagine, person A is, say, very kind of similar to the lady you were speaking about earlier, doing everything, right? Doing all the work, doing the breathwork, doing the exercise, doing the journaling, doing it, eating all the right food, drinking the water, doing all the things right, doing all the right things. But she's in a relationship that's unloving, that's quite toxic. She's in a job that's stressful and she hates. And she's running around all the time just in this kind of bubble of unhealthy relationships and energy. Then you have person B, say it's her sister, and maybe she's not that strict on everything. Maybe she likes the odd glass of wine, or she's, but she's out there, she's having fun, she's jumping into the sea, she's meeting up with her friends, she's having the crack, she's doing this. Who do you think is going to be the healthier one?
Oh, I love that. And it's so interesting to look at that concept, because people say, like, why me? Why am I the one that's getting sick? Or why am I the one that's not healthy? And because they're looking at their CV of health, and they're looking at, oh, I'm doing the hydration, I'm doing the exercise, I'm doing the food. But like the other part of your CV, which is like a massive section of your CV, is your health CV, we'll say, is exactly that. Look at the blue zones. It's community, it's connection, it's rest, not feeling guilt when you rest. Do you think anyone in different parts of Japan is feeling guilty when they rest throughout the day? A lot of, ill health and dis-ease is from the rush of thinking we have to tick off the list of health stuff. It's from, and I really feel it now, I don't know if you do, kids are around the same age, your two kids and my two kids. And I feel like there's such a disconnection from community unless you really, really try and make community. Like, I live in my hometown. I know a lot of people here, but I rarely see a lot of friends because everyone's quite busy with their 9-to-5 job and life is quite rushed. And that becomes very isolating. And I think we've really normalized that you're at home on your maternity leave or minding your kids and you're alone a lot of the time. And unless you're very lucky and you've a deep sense of community around you, you live near your family and your close friends, that is a huge part of your health.
It is, it really is.
And that's a very difficult one to talk about, I think, because society is made differently.
Totally. And if I'm being, brutally honest, I think society, it's all about women and women's rights and this, that. I think society has actually set women up to fail.
Oh,
it's like, now you can do it all, out you go, but we can't, we can't. And what's happening is we're then so hard on ourselves because we can't keep all the balls going. We're trying to work, we're trying to mind kids, we're trying to get the house going, we're trying to drop and go and here and there and everywhere. And actually we're a society that's just run ragged. And our nervous system can't.
Everyone's absolutely fried. But it's so interesting though. I remember when the twins were 1 or 2, and I was like, Jesus, now I have to get a career off the ground. I must keep my house tidy and I must do all the things. And I was like, I felt so crap because I was like, oh, I'm not spinning these plates well at all. Everything's actually smashing on the ground. And it's funny, obviously there's a lot of piece there, the self-compassion piece and learning that skill, which is a skill to be learned for a lot of people. But then exactly what you say, there's also, we have to acknowledge the environment. Everyone's specific environment is different. It's absolutely mind-blowing when you look at the woman that's quite type B and fairly carefree and doesn't really mind if her house is that messy and she's not too worried about, her career. A lot of the time, your health is going to be in a great position if you're not too worried and you care too much about the societal best case scenario, which actually for your health is like a bad scenario.
Absolutely. And because something has to give, something will give, and like one of the things I'm really passionate about speaking about now is obviously everything in the book, lifestyle as medicine, integrative health, everything around the emotional eating, shining your light, not dimming it, getting people to see their brilliance again, getting people to not shy away and put their head down, actually getting them to lift the chin and raise it towards the light and follow that and listen to the heart. But really what's coming up very strong for me as well at the moment is like, it's okay to not be in the 9-to-5 rat race. It's okay to say, not for me. It's okay to say no to things. It's okay. There's a phase and a stage for everything in your life. And no more than you, with me in the book coming out, I was all like, oh, I need to get back now into the workplace and do this. And I had to sit with it the other day and I had a really heartfelt, open conversation. And when I really sat into it, I sat into my heart, I sat into it, what is it I need? Where am I best placed? I often say, I believe in God, I'm very faith. I always would say, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? And it landed just like I was wearing sunglasses and I had lifted the lenses, like, what was I thinking? My kids are still very young. And for me, I know everybody's different, but for me, that's where my soul wants to be. It wants to be at home. It wants to be with them as much as possible, trying to blend, but in a way where I'm not run ragged and I'm not missing that journey. And I think a lot of women feel like they have to be in the workplace they have to be doing and maybe they do, but I would also ask themselves the question, if it feels right for you, wonderful. If it doesn't, and if there's a niggle in your soul, if there's a little whisper in the heart that wants something different, and if you're feeling like you're being locked into it out of ego over essence, well, then you have a choice and you have a chance. Maybe you shift things around. It's just for a short period of time. Whatever it is, like I would just say to people, don't just go with the sheep. Don't just go run with the crowd because you think you have to. Because what's happening in that place, if your soul isn't happy in that, you will get that internal tug of war. You will feel uneasy. You will feel guilt. You will feel all of these things. And if you're happy with that, that's okay. But the body, as you said, holds the score. So
I've thought about that concept so much for a number of reasons. So before I moved back to Ireland in 2020, I had a mortgage with the twins' dad. And I really thought about it financially. I probably would have stayed working my 9-to-5 teacher job at the time, because probably mentally I felt trapped in the mortgage and the need, I suppose, in my mind to go back to work. And there's also a few mental prisons going on that I didn't feel I was able to start a business or self-belief, etc. So I think from an Irish perspective, we have a lot of freedom in the sense that there's possibilities that if you want to work less, you can get by. Okay. I think I have a lot of clients in the US, and when I have this conversation with them about kind of revamping their day slightly, there's so much less wiggle room and there's so much more financial ties. And I feel like that's something, first of all, to acknowledge.
Of course.
But what we really want to make people think about today, I suppose, is where is there any wiggle room? And what's the difference between actual physical boundaries that you cannot change your day, or is there some mental traps going on? Because I know for me, I had a lot of mental traps. I had the mental trap of, I actually must go back to this 9-to-5 job to pay my mortgage. But actually, in reality, that probably wasn't the case. I could have found other ways to make some amount of money that wasn't 9-to-5. But again, it's very country subjective. There's so much nuance to this that I think, and I had this conversation with a friend the other day. She's having her second baby shortly, and her first child now is nearly 3. And she was saying like, oh, I feel so guilty. Like I haven't worked since before I had the first baby. And I was like, why do you feel guilty? And when we talked about it, it was really interesting, because she was like, God, I just feel, I'm really glad we had that conversation, because I just felt really bad that I'm just at home and my house isn't perfect looking. I feel that if I'm at home 24/7 as a stay-at-home mother, my house should be perfect and I should be making perfect meals every day. And you're like, why though? Why do you feel that you need to give so much things to think? Like, fair enough if you're a chef and you really enjoy it and you love cooking and you love cleaning and it's your hobby, brilliant. But if you don't feel that that's possible because of a number of factors, why do you feel this huge compulsion to do these things? Just like you could have said, or just written a book. Right now, I really need to start going around the world, bring the book to different stages in the US and Australia. And I must do it now, strike while the iron is hot, because I just wrote the book, And there's this huge push. I have to do this. And the last few years, I felt that push so many times. Like my work day is usually 9 to 2. And within that 9 to 2, I will every day do something for 30 to 60 minutes of exercise, always. Because I it's very different. I have my own business. I'm very lucky I have that flexibility. But I was so tempted so many times in the last few years to say, I'm going to work till 6. Actually, I'm going to up the childcare and I'm going to work till 6. Of course, I'd get a lot more done. I'd have a lot more clients. I'd probably have more than 1 or 2 courses. it would be very beneficial in a lot of ways. But again, it's looking at my values, looking at the kids, looking at my specific circumstances and what's give or take, But I think this conversation in general is one that if you listen to 2 people talking in, say, they're living in Dubai and they're stay-at-home moms and they have loads of money, right? That's a completely different narrative than 2 people in Ireland or 2 people in the US. It's so subjective, even not just country-wise, but just your own personal circumstances. But I do think there's really a conversation that could be extremely beneficial if people think about that today and say, okay, where can I actually make changes in my day?
Yeah. And
to have more connection with kids.
Yeah, or it might be something like just you never thought outside the box before. And it might be, wow, okay, maybe I could do 3 days rather than 5. Or maybe if that's, what you want. And I would say to people, this isn't to bring up any shame, guilt, or anything on anybody. It's nothing can ever change in your lives. No more joy, peace, and ease can come into our lives unless we do something different. So if we stay the same and do the same, well, then we'll always be the same. So I often say to people, and sometimes you do have to kind of have these difficult, open, honest, hard conversations, because otherwise we just stay running and distracted and disjointed. And then we're not just impacting ourselves, we're impacting all of our family, because we all know energy in the family, the environment within the home is what we all pick up on. So asking yourself, what's the energy you've been living in for the last year, 6 months? So when you get up in the morning, you come into the kitchen, are you Tasmanian devil mom, run around, coffee, sugar, coffee? Like, I've definitely been that mom. We all probably have been that. Get out the door with your shoes. It's just like, go, go, go. Or have you been in an energy maybe that's been a bit angry and a bit resentful or a bit bitter? Or maybe you've been calm and grounded. And we will all have a mix of that. But as a whole, what's the energy you've been living in? And then the other question I always ask people is, if you do not change anything, and you stay working the way you're working, living the way you're living, eating the way you're eating, drinking the way you're drinking, having the same conversations, sleeping the way you're sleeping, living exactly how you are right now. If you do not change anything in that, what vision or picture does that look like for you and your loved ones or your family or whatever in 5 or 10 years' time? If that's a vision that inspires you and that you're happy with, wonderful, brilliant, keep it up. But if it's a vision that doesn't inspire you, or maybe scares you a little bit, well, then it's a beautiful gift if you're listening to this conversation today, because now is a chance and a choice to say, well, what could I do differently? Not because you need to do differently, only if your soul is not happy where it's at. Only if your soul is saying, this isn't really nourishing me right now. I'm not feeling at ease in this space right now. Might be in a relationship, might be where you live, it might be your job. It doesn't matter what it is. Just if there's a nudge or if there's a whisper that's saying, come on, there's a little, listen to that. That's all I would say. Just sit with it. Please don't run from it, because we do run from it, and we distract through Instagram, we distract through food, we distract through having the bottle of wine. We keep ourselves distracted to pull ourselves away from the actual truth, because when we hear the truth, we can never unhear it. And then when we hear it, it means we have to sometimes make a change. And when we have to make a change, we have to go outside the comfort zone. And that can be scary. But
you can't unlearn this either. Once you hear it now and you start to look at the environment, and I think when you look at your environment as a whole, I regularly would reflect on this. So for the last few months, I was like going to the gym as a tick the box. I wasn't enjoying it as usual. Usually it would be the part of my day where I'd really enjoy, it'd be my time, I'd really enjoy it. So I wasn't enjoying it as much, and I questioned that. I also wasn't getting walking as much. I also noticed my time of going to bed was getting slightly later. So sometimes it's not even like massive changes. It's just recalibrating with a few small tweaks. So now I was like, okay, I'm going to change gym, just mix it up, new energy, new people. I'm going to, get up a bit earlier, so my sleep time is a bit earlier. And also thinking, like, is there anything I can, and I hear this so much of people, they're like, oh, I just started this, and like, I feel so much happier. Like, oh, every morning small things like, the usual examples of puzzles, gardening, knitting, like they're doing something for 10 minutes extra a day. It can just be that simple addition that also is really beneficial. But when you think of it, right, if you're not living in line with your soul and your purpose, you see a lot of the signs come up where you're regularly getting headaches, you're tossing and turning at night, it manifests in so many different ways. The body just shows you.
Yeah, it does.
Like the body will say, oh, like, and I always know this, when I'm not living in alignment, I will get sick more often. I will get headaches more often. There's specific signs to everyone that show up. And I had this conversation the other day, which I just found, it really opened up my mind. A woman in her late 60s, and the last year has been really working on her health. And she said, like, before that, she's really neglected her health. Like, she was a very sedentary lifestyle. Her diet wasn't great, etc., etc. Right? She said the last year she's been really on top of nutrition. She has a personal trainer. She's walking every day. And she was like, I was like, how are you getting on? She's like, I feel pretty terrible. And it was just such an eye-opening conversation, because we drilled it down. And then when we spoke about it, the reason she felt so terrible is because she was like, I've just had such a difficult last few decades. My body is just so stuck in survival that nothing I do is feeling good. And I was like, we were thinking about, like, well, you know, all the solutions. Straight away, we were solution focused of like, okay, you need to do yoga, or you need to do work with some body coach that helps you do the somatic work. And we were thinking of all these solutions. But then we were also taking a step back and been like, but like, what is making you flat and dull? And she was like, oh, I'd really like to be in a relationship. Oh, and I'd actually really like to be in nature more. And when you drill into it and you have the conversation, or you journal about it, or you chat to a friend about it, you probably will notice some things you could do or you could subtract from your day that make a massive difference and bring you closer to you being able to drop into the feeling of, oh, I can actually give myself what I want because I'm able to listen, because I'm slowing down a little bit.
Absolutely. And like, it's not like, oh, you just go off and you make this big life decision. Like it's the things you do every day regularly. It's those small things that you're saying, scaffold things onto things you're already doing, or it's the things you subtract and take away. And the more it's like, you know, in the book, I use the analogy of Michelangelo, who's sculpting the statue of David. He was like, the statue is already in there. I'm just going to chip away at all the marble that isn't David. And sometimes in our lives, we don't have to know. And my book opens with that. It's me 4:30 in the morning, sitting on a bench right down in Ocean Bay, or looking over the ocean, not knowing where the hell I was going to go, but knowing I can't stay here anymore because it's not nourishing me. And sometimes it's just knowing that, okay, this isn't working right now. So what can I do to start? And that might be, you know, using different modalities that you're talking about. And that then allows you to drop in to the heart, into the soul, so that you can actually start to listen, feel, and know. Because a lot of people say to me, well, I don't even know what my purpose is. I don't know what my passion is. How am I meant to figure that out? And that's because we've obviously we were tunnel vision up through school and to college, just do this, get the grades, go to college. But we're in a job and even probably think about, how did I even get here, as you said, you know? And when you come to, you know, as you start to mature in life, you start to then kind of ask the questions, okay, wow, what is this actually right? But it's like, you know, the only way we can drop into the soul and listen to it and hear it is when we get still and silent enough. So we have to unplug ourselves from the external world. That might be looking at, even if it's just 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes in the morning. Morning is a wonderful time because you're still in that kind of, you're not gone into the stress of the world. You're not plugged into the external world. So using that few minutes, even if you go out, ground, take your shoes and socks off, and just sit and listen, or go to nature, or go up the mountain, or go down to the sea, or whatever it is. And maybe you journal, maybe you just sit and listen, maybe you just say a prayer, maybe you just ask for guidance, or you go on the yoga mat, or you get on your bike and you go for it. When you're in that flow state, you take yourself out of that sympathetic, dominant way of fight, flight, freeze, fall, and you just allow yourself just to drop, just to release, just let go, and be willing. The word I would say is be willing to try something new. Be willing to unravel yourself from what you think you should be doing. And just see what comes up for you. See what you hear, see what you feel. And it's not always a big like light bulb moment. It might be just, I love this feeling of being on my bike. I love this feeling of being on the yoga mat. I love this feeling of being out by the sea. I'm going to do that more. I'm going to be called to that more. And the more you do that, is the more it opens up something else and something else. And then your energy starts to shift. Your vibration starts to shift. And when you start to shift your vibration and your frequency and your energy, well, then through the law of attraction, you will start to draw in more things, more people that nourish you, more situations that inspire you, rather than being caught in maybe the more lower energy stuff, which is blame and shame and guilt and give out and the negative or the toxic food and blah, 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 and the late nights and the scrolling. And you start to untangle yourself a little bit more, and you start to get into this more of a flow state. And in the flow state, that's where the more ease comes in. And life isn't always like, and I would put my hand up and say, I'm absolutely not perfect, 100%. I woke up this morning and I was feeling a bit flat. I was feeling a bit stuck. I was feeling a little bit kind of just bleh, that kind of way. And my little boy was, getting upset about something. So there was all of that this morning for me. But before I came on this, I said, I know I need to shift my energy. I know I need to do something. So I got into the sea and I jumped in and I got into the water, and it just completely refreshed me and cleansed me and allowed me to kind of just sit back and go in and just shake off the shit, basically. I always say, how do you shake it off? So that I could sit here today and be in my heart space rather than be in my head. And that's the big thing in life. I think we're working from ego over essence. Ego is what I think I should be doing. And what I would say to people is, how do you know the difference? The ego voice is frantic. It's kind of like, come on, we need to go. It's kind of like, it's more of a fear, frantic frazzleness to it. The heart voice, or the essence voice, or the soul voice, it's deeper, it's richer, it's slower. It's kind of like sitting with a young, like, there's a story of the two monks. You have the young monk and the old monk, and they're up a mountain or whatever, and the young monk is dying to get down and go after it and do things. And the old monk is just sitting there, and he's very calm and he's wise, and he's like, they'll come to us. And that's the kind of difference. The heart is kind of like that soulful, like an older, elder, wiser voice. It's slower in its tone and its pace. It's just more nourishing. But the head is a bit frantic and ego. And you'll know the difference when you listen to it more.
That whole concept and area just interests me so much. And I've spent such a long time figuring out how to help clients, and just in life in general for myself, how to be able to get into flow state and to allow yourself to enjoy the bike ride, the gardening, the puzzle. Because for a majority of women, that all sounds crap. Like, because they're not present enough to enjoy any of them slow things, because we're used to such frantic, rushing, scrolling, working. So I think that, and when I made the Regulate, Rebalance, Reset course, I spent a lot of time figuring out the right tools for people to actually be able to go into the state where they're able to enjoy them simple things that allow you to regulate. Because I just found it fascinating how many women over the years I've worked in this space say, yeah, well, I'm doing them things, like I'm going on the walk, the bike ride, the sea swim, I'm knitting, I'm crocheting, I'm hiking. They're doing all the things, but it all feels like a tick the box exercise, because they haven't looked at the mental patterns, the limiting beliefs, the lack of compassion, the stuck in survival mode. They don't know how to get out of them traps. And I think when you acknowledge that and understand there's nothing wrong with me, that I'm not enjoying the gardening, that the gardening seems horrible, and it seems, actually I feel guilty when I'm gardening because I should be cleaning the house. It's understanding that we have all these neural networks set up that we're nearly set up for failure in terms of enjoying them things like the sea swim, because we don't feel worthy. We don't understand why we're not able to sink into these things. It's like, it's so disconnected and far away from us. So I think when I coach someone that, or when I'm in the course, I was trying to really understand the essence of how does a person go from the rush lifestyle to a lifestyle where they can actually stop, be present, be regulated, and enjoy them things that right now feel quite boring and they're guilt-inducing. And I think the more we think about that, the more we'll understand, wow, actually I have a lot of mental traps set up in my mind that mean that when I do anything that isn't deemed hyperproductive by myself, I don't enjoy it.
Yeah. So I would say, first and foremost, if you're driving a car down the motorway at 120 kilometers per hour and you hit the brake, it's just not going to stop straight away. So you kind of have to hit the brake, and then the car starts to slow down, right? And then eventually what you might be able to do is you might be able to pull it in off the road and actually stop the car. So same with life. If you've been running and racing for the last 30, 40 years, and your mindset, your subconscious programs is to be busy, is to be productive, is to be loved, is to be seen, what's going to happen is you're not just going to flick out of that like straight away. You might, but it takes time. It's like you go to the gym, you're not going to get the six packs after one session. So patience and acceptance. So I have a rule by A in the book, and it's you firstly have to have the awareness. So you can't change anything unless you're aware that so you're aware now that you're driving 120 kilometers down the motorway, you're never stopping. Or you're like the athlete on the track and you're running a 400-meter sprint, but you keep running and running and you never get off the track to rest, rehabilitate and rehydrate. What's going to happen to the athlete? They're going to burn out, they're going to get injured. They're going to underperform in the long run. So awareness is the first key. Then it's acceptance of where you're at. And that comes in the compassion piece. That comes in, okay, this is where I'm at. It's to accept that this has happened. So maybe something has happened or something is happening. Maybe it's outside of your control. But to stay resistant to it, to stay bitter to it, to stay angry toward it is not going to heal it or help it. So sometimes we just have to accept, okay, this is where I'm at. And then we acknowledge. So that's therein comes the understanding. Why am I here? Why? What's the trauma that's been driving me to over-succeed and overperform and to prove myself? When you get to that, that brings in all that inner child work. It kind of goes back to, well, what's the narrative? What's the story I've been running in my head? What have I been telling myself? What's the identity I'm trying to cling to? And where is that coming from? And when we can understand our journey, then we can accept it more and we can acknowledge it more. Then we move into the action piece. So now that I understand it, now that I'm aware of it, now that I can accept it, now that I acknowledge it, can I start to have an action point? So how do I go about changing it? How do I go about maybe implementing something different, something new? Or maybe what do I just need to do to surrender? How do I let go of this? How do I cut the cord to this? How do I forgive that person or forgive myself? How do I bring in that non-judgment? That's the action piece. And then when you have the action piece, you can drop into the achievement piece. So that's celebrating the things that you are doing well, those mini wins, celebrating the journey you have come on. If you have been through trauma, if you have been through, and we've all been through trauma, whether it's a big T or small traumas, we've all experienced challenge and we've all experienced loss and grief and all of those things that rattle us to our core when we're not expecting them. But how can we bring in those mini achievement pieces? And that's where we can bring the soul. Like, we are all so resilient. If you're here today and you've been through traumas, you're resilient. So it's to acknowledge that and to be proud of what you've come through, given what you were handed down at that time and space and knowing what you know. And it's to acknowledge the achievement part brings in the joy. The biggest thing I find in my own life and what I find in people when I'm working with is we don't give ourselves the permission to feel joy. We don't give ourselves the permission to experience pleasure. We don't give ourselves because the guilt comes in, the shame comes in. And there's a big difference between shame and guilt. We often intermingle them. But guilt is, oh, I've done something wrong. Or I'm doing something wrong. Shame is, I am wrong. And that's a very wounding of the soul emotion to keep holding. So that rule by A is like just working through that. But then also you were saying about the people doing all the stuff. They're doing all the stuff, but they're still doing all the physical stuff. Nothing will ever change unless you start to drop in down to the next level, which is the mind. And that's changing those subconscious programs, rewiring your brain, starting to see a new vision of yourself, starting to replay new imagery, starting to cut yourself from the past that was holding you back. And then nothing will really, really, really change. When you start to do that, then you can drop into the soulful place. Then you can hear the whispers. Then you can hear what will light you up. You can start to live a life. And that might be you move country, you move whatever it is. You start to follow what the soul is yearning for and longing for at this stage and phase in your life. And I really think that's the journey. And in the book, I started the physical because that's where I know people are at. That's where we kind of understand. So that looks at stress and the nervous system, getting to the flow state. It looks at our sleep and rest and recovery and overcoming brokenness. It looks at your nutrition, but also your relationship to food, because it's not just what we eat, it's why we're eating. And then it also looks at your movement as medicine. Then it moves into the mind part, which is, this is where I'm talking about the next pillar. There's 11 pillars of how we build mental fitness of the mind. And then the inner soul piece is the 11 pillars of how we can light up our soul. And I think that we all everything is important. Like, it's not just work on the body, just work, because if you're just working on the soul and you're not working on the body, it's all interconnected. It's all interconnected. But when you start to, I suppose, surrender the things that no longer serve you, you start to let go of the ego drags and pulls that are kind of hooking you into people and places and situations that aren't really nourishing you. You start to look at your environment. Who are you surrounding yourself with? Are they people that inspire you and nourish you, or are they toxic situations that when you come away you feel, oh, that didn't light me up? Watch your body language as well. It will tell you, if you're around people and you're like this, you're literally kind of protecting yourself. You're kind of like, oh, if the shoulders are up to the ears, arms are folded, the belly is kind of tightened, shoulders are scrunched, or the jaw is locked, that's like a tensed, braced position, or I don't feel really safe here. And we know, and you know better than anyone, Rebecca, when you're not safe, the nervous system won't regulate. So where do you feel safe? I often say it's like if you have an ice cube and you place it on the counter, it's going to melt and the water's just going to go everywhere. You have no boundaries, you have no container that you feel held and supported is. But if you put the ice cube into a glass, it melts, but it's held. So who's your glass? What's your glass? What holds you? What contains you? What nourishes you? Who are the people? What are the places? What are the things that hold you, that nourish you, that make you feel whole? It's all about returning to wholeness.
That's a really nice analogy. And I also think when I look back at all the years that I was trying to achieve that, it is not tangible a lot of the time. There's a lot of trial and error, and it's a lot of testing. And when I went to different therapists, kind of regulation coaches, life coaches, doctors, dermatologists, when you go to everyone, and you spend a lot of money, you realize that the journey, first of all, you are the expert of your own health. Second of all, you have to be ready to embrace the unknown, which feels unfamiliar, which will a lot of the time make you want to run away from the changes you're making. So when I went through, I suppose, a good few years of understanding, like, where should I be? And not even the word should, but where is best for me to be for me, rather than where I think I should be. But it really made me stop and think of how my life was driven a lot by shame. And that shame, like you said, is the opposite of self-compassion. Shame is when we feel we are the problem, and not that we're guilty about something. And that shame, I think, is the reason why so much people don't do the steps of, I suppose, of real change and finding out what their purpose is, because they're stuck in deep-rooted shame. And for me, that was like very much, I think, very all millennials nearly think like this, that your self-worth is connected to your productivity. So when you're not been busy and productive, you feel shame and guilt. And a lot of the time when I was, for most of my 20s, I was over-exercising, under-eating. And if I didn't do that, I felt deep shame about lack of discipline, or about, that I'm lazy, or all these labels you put on yourself. So I think there's a lot to be said for looking at your identity as well. And that's a huge piece of work to do when we look at all this in general, of what labels have I put on myself over the years. And I think this is one you hear very often, like, and you think if you don't deeply think into it, you don't really understand how your identity can change, and how probably subconsciously, I did an exercise for a day, and it opened my eyes so much. I just, for the day, in the notes section of my phone, wrote down like fleeting thoughts, anything that was coming into my head. I was just listening for the day. And I couldn't believe the amount of criticisms, I suppose, I did to myself throughout the day, and how much I shamed myself throughout the day. Even what I thought was very minor things, like, you should have worked harder that in the gym there. You should have worked another half an hour on that piece of work. You should have, should have all day. And I was like, wow, here's me thinking at the time I was doing pretty well in terms of being self-compassionate. But a lot of people's baseline is very different to what we think. Like, what's going on subconsciously, we've deemed as normal. And then when you really listen to it, you're like, oh, wow, these labels are stopping me make any change, because the nervous system is saying, okay, we don't really want to make any changes, because every time you make change, you criticize yourself, and the nervous system doesn't like that. So let's shy away from any change. So when you're doing that work, it's a continuous process of realizing, oh, I'm going to hit roadblocks. This is not going to be linear. I'm going to feel discomfort. And a lot of the time at the beginning, when I'm trying these new things, I'm not going to enjoy the sea swim or the yoga or any of them things because it's unfamiliar.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it's neuroplasticity. I mean, the more you do something, the more you will start to rewire the brain. And now, instead of taking path A, which your default road is, you always go down path A, and that's the road that's the widest. It's like if you're in a meadow or something and you have a path paved, and anything happens when you're tired or you're angry or whatever, that's the path you go, because that's where you've been going for the last how many years. But now you have to go, oh my God, make a new path. And like anything, you have to pave it out, and that takes time and it takes effort and it takes energy, and people just don't want to do that. But the more that you do that is the more then that path gets walked, that path gets, used, and that path then brings you to such a better place in terms of your mindset, your mood, your vitality, your life force energy, your joy, your peace, your ease, because now you're doing something that's bringing you closer to an alignment to what feels right and nourishing for you. And then when the shit does hit the fan and you do get defaulted, now you don't automatically go to this path, the first path. You now can go, actually, I can go this path. So then you start getting your dopamine hits from something else. So rather than your dopamine hit from the bottle of Coke and the box of biscuits, now you get it from going out for a run or a walk. So they're just wonderful ways of rewiring. But also, again, it's not to remember that you're just getting a dopamine hit to flee or escape from an emotion you're not trying to feel. So the essence of everything is really coming back to not running from yourself, not running from your emotions. We tend to say label emotions as good and bad and positive and negative. Every emotion is so important. Every emotion needs to be welcomed. Every emotion needs to be pulled up and looked at and expressed and then released. Otherwise, it's like a parasite within your body. And the more you ignore it, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and gain more power and cause you to act out in disharmonious ways, cause you to, binge eat, to overdrink, to whatever it is, because you're trying to just like flee and trying to not meet this. But I often say it's like if I'm holding a bottle of fizzy water and I have the lid, tight, really tight, and I start to shake the bottle. That's like all those emotions, all that stuff stirring up. It's all those hormones getting tossed around. It's the stress that's shaking us. But if I don't open the lid and just tighten it, what's going to happen eventually is you're going to get this big explosion. And that's generally a burnout, a breakdown, an outburst of some sort, right? So what we're talking about today, Rebecca, is how can we start to open the lid just gently, so it's like very gently. So we're not locking and suppressing, but we're allowing the fizzle to come out, those emotions to bubble up easily and effortlessly, regularly throughout the day. So it's not building and building and building. And that's through the lifestyle habits that you implement that help you to meet those emotions. That's like what I mentioned earlier, the spirituality, which is the practices that allow you to listen to the soul so that you're not locked and blocked, and that you don't end up living a life that's causing more stress and strain rather than a life that's bringing more ease and grace.
Yeah. And I think when we look at, that's a really nice way to put it, when you keep opening the lid slightly, you realize as well that you have to feel, and we're notorious in 2025 for avoiding a lot of the negative emotions with distraction. So with the scrolling or with the TV or with the background noise or just generally pushing them away. But you can't feel the joy or the present unless you feel the shitty stuff too. So it's like acknowledging that the days I feel low and I feel despondent and I feel, especially now, I noticed since I had kids, the days before my period, I feel quite an acute drop in mood, more so than I've ever felt. And one way that helps me ground in them times is the acknowledgement that I need to feel the lows in order to feel the highs. And life isn't like I'm trying to run away from the pain all the time, because that is life. And I cannot do life without pain, adversity, grief. It's pretty much impossible. You have to lean into it and acknowledge it, because I did spend so many years avoiding thinking about so much things and having the conversation or doing the thing was very difficult, because I really had that subconscious mentality that actually life should be all roses and I should be like Mary across the road who looks like she has it all together. But that's not the reality. And I really think about this person. I met a person years ago, and her lifestyle was one big long holiday. Like, she was always going on holiday, at home in a relationship where they decided they didn't want to have kids. And the whole life just looked such a controlled scenario that it was made for, life is made for joy, you know? And I thought, wow, like, that looks like a really fun lifestyle. And it stopped me in my tracks, because it made me think, wow, I felt a pang of guilt there for not having as much holidays and kind of a controlled life as them. Like, the house is always clean, tick, 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 box. I was like, hold on a second. They're not immune to all the shit that happens in life, in your work, in your relationships, with your family life. They're not immune to that. And it's such a wake-up call to me that I think there was an element as well of like them making a decision together, which is absolutely fine, to have a life that they would, as much as possible, avoid pain. Okay? And I thought, yeah, there's pros and cons to that. But also, when you think of other people, oh, they have it so easy, that is such a lie. It is such a lie. Everyone has their shit. And some people are much better at concealing it than others. And that's something that I think about regularly.
And you can't avoid pain. And if you do avoid pain, you're running and you're distracting and you're not living. You know, there's a difference between suffering and, you know, being in pain. Pain is something we'll all experience, but it's how you react to the pain. So if you decide to stay in suffering, that's very different to feeling the pain and then moving past the pain. But my husband Jeremy told a very good story actually the other day, and I thought it was brilliant. And it's a story of a fisherman, and he's out there in a boat, and he's, you know, in a little boat, and he's trying to catch a few fish, and then he stops and he looks onto the harbour, and he sees this guy rolling up in a big Ferrari, and he's going, oh my God, look at that guy in the Ferrari. Wow, like, how did he make that? Look at me here in the shitty little boat. And then it moves to the guy in the Ferrari, and he's sitting there in the Ferrari, and he's stressed off his head, and he looks up to the sky and he sees this incredible jet flying by, and he's like, fucking hell, you know, how did he get to that? And I'm only here down in my Ferrari, like. And then it goes to the guy in the Ferrari, and he's up there and he's stressed off his head, and he's like going into this big meeting and is totally stressed. And he looks down at the guy in the fishing boat and he goes, oh, fuck, I wish I was just down there in the fishing boat catching a few fish.
Yeah.
It just shows you, like, we're always chasing what's the next thing. And, you know, sometimes we just need to strip it back and say, like, what is it?
I had such a realization there lately as well. Like, you know, sometimes you stop and you're like, I can't believe the age I am. Like, you stop for a second and you're just like, where did 5, 10, 15 years go? And sometimes stops in your tracks and you're like, wow, life goes. Like, it's especially since I had kids, I'm like, Jesus, time feels like, unless you mark it and you're present, it just runs away with you, and you can't get that that time back. Such a cliche, but it really does make you think. You have a few choices to make with the perspective you look through, the lens you look through. And a lot of the time, and I had this conversation with another friend who has PMDD, so like 1 or 2 weeks of the month, she's just really struggling mentally. And we were like, same, because I would feel, I don't have PMDD, but it's not far off it that week. And we just said, like, wow, some people have it so good. And we were like nearly feeling like, wow, imagine having a full month where your mood is pretty stable and it's all quite predictable. But then we said to ourselves, well, look, like, this is, and then we just talked about the acceptance piece and understanding that we're doing the best we can with it. And it really made me think, like, and then we had the conversation of, actually, it's much easier than another scenario that there could be with mental health. So it's like, every time, whatever scenario you're in, the acceptance piece and realizing that a lot of things don't last long, everything's in seasons. We were like, oh, should another 10 years? we won't have this problem. And it's like, life is just full of chapters and accepting where you're at in the chapter. And I think when, like you said, the acceptance piece, once we acknowledge that, it's much easier to move forward. But I just want to ask you, Miriam, where people can find you, because your book that is going to, I'd say, help a lot of people, I know it's going to help a lot of people, is out shortly. And I just would love for you to tell people about that, where they can find your social media, because I'd say after today's conversation, a lot of people will deeply reflect, I suppose, and they probably will want to connect.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you so much for having me on, for holding the space today to have these conversations. And I think we just need more of these conversations. I really feel like people need to just drop a little bit more and just get out of the masculine energy and into the feminine energy. So we both have both energies within the body, the yin, the yang. But the masculine energy, of course, we need it. It's to get up, to go, to do, the kind of more, productive side. But then the yin is it's the dark, it's the softness, it's the sensitivity, it's the delicacy, it's the surrendering at peace. It's that, not having to rush and race 100 miles an hour. It's the slowing down. It's the fluidity of life. Are we flowing freely with life? And if you are having issues with say your cycle and stuff, well, ask them, well, that's very much, when you think about in yoga, you have to look at the chakras, which are the energy systems. It's your second chakra, which is all about pleasure and joy and flowing freely with life. And it's the unseen. So what are you kind of packing away? What are you hiding from the world? What are you keeping secret? What's stagnant there? What's not flowing? And life is, and that's the feminine within us. So are you allowing your femininity to come out? Are you allowing yourself to drop into that yin, slower energy, that kind of go within, reflect, rather than go 100 miles an hour, go out there and get everything done and tick every box? So we need both, but which one is more dominant, and can we kind of sway between the two more often? And that brings more flow and regulation. So, sorry, you asked me a question and I went off one there. Where can you find me? So, yeah, Instagram. My Instagram handle is at Miriam Hussey _ And we also have our company called Soul Space. So it's Soul Space the Experience on Instagram. We have a retreat coming up, which I'm really excited. So if you've enjoyed this, can you imagine 4 full days of this? Like, it's incredible. It really is a transformative journey for people from the very beginning to when they leave. They just leave different. They leave completely lighter in themselves. Their eyes are brighter. They just sometimes let go a lot of stuff. And I'll be predominantly leading this one. So we'll be looking at all the elements of the book in Light Up. So how we can light up, looking at the mind, looking at the body, looking at the soul, the different pillars. And then obviously it's time and space down in the beautiful Armada in Clare, right on the water, right on the cliffs. Beautiful food, beautiful accommodation, and beautiful people. That's the one thing people take away from those retreats, is they make friends for life. And I may have an event as well coming up this side of Christmas, but I will share all the details with that on my Instagram once if it's finalised.
Oh, great. Look forward to that.
So, thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Miriam.
Thanks so much.
What a pleasure, as usual. I always, after we speak, I go away and journal a lot. Because there's so much that you think about and reflect on, and yeah, it's just amazing to have you as usual. So I'm really grateful. Thank you so much.
God bless.
That definitely gave me a lot to think about. Miriam's details are in the show notes. And if today resonated with you and you're someone who knows what to do but can't seem to stay consistent with it, and it's easy to go off track because you're spinning so many plates and you're overwhelmed, that's exactly why I created the Rebalance membership. Every month we give you clear, simple, daily steps to build routines that actually stick without the overwhelm or the extra fluff. It's just straight to the point. The link is in the show notes for that, and I'll see you in the next episode.